Oh, look at that. Look at that, Abuna. Look at that. It's working again.
There was nothing else? Do you have your PowerPoint ready? It's right there. Okay. Yeah. I'm just going to do a quick introduction. Let me give you the proper introduction. I'm just pulling up a verse. Mic check, mic check. Mic check, mic check. We might have you use this one instead. Okay. All right. We want to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. But we really thank you for coming tonight. As you all know, this is the fourth year, our fourth annual year of doing Mental Health Awareness Month in May, as some of you have attended before in the past. So today we are going to begin. And I think I would ask you guys for a few favors. Number one, this is a very important topic. We bring it about to destigmatize mental health in our community. That's first and foremost. Number two, it's to make us aware, or raise awareness, but more so educate and promote growth for us and enable us to help each other and to give us hope through Christ. And I want to share the verse that we used for the underlying theme of the month. It is Isaiah 41, verse 10. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. So today, we will begin our first pun in there, and I'm very excited about it. Mina is a longtime friend of mine and a servant in the church, a fellow brother in Christ. He's also a licensed psychiatrist. He is an assistant professor at Columbia University, and he is a great professional in his field. And I ask you guys, as we begin mental health, that you do pray for this service and that it touches the hearts of those who need this service, including all of us in different capacities. So, if you can please give your undivided attention to our brother, Dr. Mina Merhom.
Thank you, Minardos. Thank you so much, Minardos. Abuna, maybe if you can bless for us. Okay, so I might step out over here. Is that okay? Am I still visible? As long as you're in the middle, okay. I'll be in the square. Just want to be able to see people more clearly. So thank you for the generous introduction. I'm excited to be with you today and to chat about this topic, not just because it's near and dear to my heart, but as we were talking sort of before the talk, this was sort of relevant and like important and destigmatizing a couple of years ago when the church started it, which kudos, by the way, to the church because nobody else does this. But now, in like the post-COVID era, I think the stats are roughly 2,000% of us are going through it, right? I think that's just like more or less, you know what I mean? Like at this point, in the post-COVID time, you know how we've come to a point where you look at somebody who hasn't gotten COVID, and you're like, yo, where you been, bro? How did you not get COVID? We all got it. So I say this to say is that in one way, like Minardo was saying, in one way or another, whether clinically or not, this is going to touch every single one of our lives. My hope is that we can go on this journey together for peace of mind, because I don't know if there are things in life more valuable than your own peace of mind. You know, like that exhale feeling, like, kid. My hope is that we can have one of those today. Sorry. Come on. There it is. So, but first things first, though, I think it's still the season, so Christ is risen.
Truly he is risen.
One more time. Christ is risen.
Truly he is risen.
Let's go. We're in person. This is not a Zoom talk. You gotta say things back. So that's also the framework for our conversation, is somehow the resurrection is the backdrop for peace of mind. Because we're not talking about like Oprah peace of mind. This is not self-help kind of thing, like here are some tools to kind of get yourself better. No, this is Christ-centric. That's going to be our conversation. I think this is going to... Come on. Should I do something else? Ya Rab. Okay. So I'm just going to fly through this because it's part of the intro. Just because sort of in the age of misinformation and time that we're in. Oh, it went by faster. My bad. I have to adjust to the clicker. Pray less. That's the name of That's the name of the game for me. You want to click? Okay. Or I could just click gently. All right. Oh, thank you. Oh, that helps. Thank you. Can you click? I'm gonna point to you. I'm gonna point to you like you're the clicker. So feel free to read this or not. Just kind of click through, if you will. This is just a part of, in the sort of misinformation age that we're in now. It used to be a point. I used to have this T-shirt that said, "Trust me, I'm a doctor." It was like Dr. Pepper. But right now, nobody really trusts doctors. So that's the only reason I put this, to say, doctor said this, but a doctor, but who cares what doctors say? So I've just put this to say, not to say anything about myself, but to say that this is something I've devoted myself to. So I know a couple things about it, but that's where kind of I'm coming from. And let's go with this. These are not real people, by the way. It's funny when you Google stock images of two Coptic people, and these guys come. This is like Bishoy and like Mariam. Like there's no question for a stock image. And as you can see, there are these two friends going on a journey, right? There's a little watermark that says to the stock image. They're just friends, okay? Don't tell their parents. This is, don't be that guy. But they're about to go on this journey where, if you could click for me, they start to feel the way a lot of us feel in pop quiz from sort of Bescha. Remember where this passage is from? Hand raise or just shout out. You're not going to be in the stream. Don't worry. No one's going to know. It's from Ezekiel. And it's from your funeral. Remember your funeral? It was a good time. Who doesn't remember their funeral? I mean, it was just so much fun. Remember, we celebrated our funeral after Palm Sunday, and the church reminded us there is this beautiful passage in Ezekiel where God takes Ezekiel to an area of dry bones, an area where there's death and like dryness and destruction. And he says, can these bones live? He asks Ezekiel, can there be life after like destruction and COVID and information wars and war? These two people, these two hypothetical people that we're going to go, and the reason we call them Mark and Mary, brothers, is like these are the SM people, right? This is Saint Mary and Saint Mark. Trying to keep up with Menardus' puns. That was my goal for today. But these people find themselves maybe in a situation that you may find yourself in now too. Is there was all this stuff these past couple of years, and I look around my life, and there's sort of dry bones. I look in sort of my friendships, and it's a little dry. I look in my family life, and it's a little dry. I look at my sandwich, and it's super dry. Like, just things in your life just look like they've lost taste. You know what I'm talking about? Even if you haven't had COVID, and you still lost a little bit of taste, long COVID status. So we want to take them from this to, and they got to this point of saying, listen, one of the servants last year was sort of saying to me, Mina, I know you're a mental health guy. Can we stop with the awareness? We are so aware. We're awared out. Like, I get it. We're aware. We're at a point in 2022 where you can't turn on the TV and there isn't some mental health conversation or some self-help thing or on social media, right? There's a lot of super popular social media sort of psychiatric stuff. Our goal today is not going to be just awareness, but it's going to be this verse. This is sort of the direction of our peace of mind, where St. Paul says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. A sound mind. This is rarer than we may think for us in the church. A lot of times, especially when we go through a lot of stuff, we find ourselves on autopilot. And this idea of a sound mind, where I understand where I am and what's happening around me, is more and more difficult as time goes on. So we're going to tackle that a little bit. So for these guys, our two hypothetical Mary and Mark here, so they came and said, like, oh, we want to get mental health care. Do you ever recognize these images? Anybody know these movies? Hannibal Lecter, Silence of the Lambs, right? And One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is probably before our time, but historically, whenever you think about like mental health treatment, like I was in a conversation with somebody our parents' age last week, which, as you know, is very friendly when you're talking about mental health. They totally get it. So I was like, Uncle, I think, we may need a little bit of help. And he's like, why? Shayfni Bashid the Shadi? I was like, my man, that ship has sailed. There is no shot to be, The perception, though, whether you're in our parents' generation, or even for us, though, when we're honest, like, we want to say to ourselves that we're young, and, like, we get it, and we're super, like, you know what I mean? We're relevant. There's still a part of us that's like, oh, mental health stuff is that's still kind of crazy, though. You know what I mean? Like, You think, what do I need, like, to be locked up in some mental health ward? You think I need to be, like, committed? There's a part of us that still has this perception, or we have this perception, which is, okay, I'm going to go lie down on somebody's couch talking about my mom. Yes, when I was 4, my mom gave me basturma. Okay, that's the source of all my problems. So we either have this idea of like, oh, the mental health stuff is like too extreme, it's too much, or a skepticism is like, is this really going to work? I mean, you want to talk to people? I talk to Buddha all the time. Talk to people, I talk to my friend. My friend is very knowledgeable. So that was the battle of where they're starting from. So they decided, go ahead, to do the Coptic thing. What is the Coptic thing to do? Is ask a Buddha. And one of the joyous things in my life over the past couple of years has been actually a lot of referrals from Abunas. It's the best. When I get to pray with a priest and he says, hey, there's a spiritual component that I'm taking care of and you can't touch, but there's a mental health component that I need you to help with. So they ask Abuna, and he says the following. We're going to go one at a time for this. Go back, sorry. Abuna says to them, these are compilations of like true things, true conversations that a priest had with people. He says, listen, every part of you needs to be healed. Every part of you needs to be healed. He says, first, your spiritual choices are causing you turmoil. This may seem obvious from like a repentance standpoint, that a psychiatrist will tell you, yeah, our repentance is part of our mental health. Did you know that? That may not be in the DSM, but our spiritual choices, the sins that accumulate in our own lives, is the starting point of saying like, yo, I want to be healthy. I want to have peace of mind. I want to have sound mind. It begins here. It begins with my spiritual choices. And then it goes with your dietary choices. I know this is weird to say for being Egyptian in the Holy 50, that you should be eating like the table. But the truth is, and actually the church fathers talk a lot about this too. This is not like a millennial, like super cool topic to talk about today. The church has always thought, hey, what you put into your body is an important part of your mood. That food is actually medicine. And then it continues. Here's the toughie. How many people agree with this statement that says the experiences you had in the past are impacting your current choices? Give me a hand raise for I agree. Give me a hand raise for I don't agree. You can choose.
No, I half agree.
Oh, half agree. Okay, I like that. Give me a hand raise for I don't have hands. I'm not going to vote. I'm opting out. The reason why this part is important, both spiritually and psychologically, the degree by which we believe this part is going to be the self-work that you will put into your life that says to you, my past can continue to dictate my future, or you can be aware of it and you can go on a different course. Does that make sense? The difficulty we have here is that we don't really buy this. I was reading a nice book from like a famous Christian artist who discovered therapy. He said after he'd gone through all these sort of situations and stuff, he gave this analogy. He's like, at one point, if you have a little bit of a cut and you drop some, hand sanitizer on it or something, what happens? It burns. Does it burn the same way it would burn on your regular skin? No, it does not. Why? Because there's already a vulnerability in that skin. There's already an exposure there. There's already something there that you're adding to something that is coming from the past. And the part that he began to realize in his own life is, let me ask you in your own life. Can you think of a situation in the past couple of weeks where you reacted to something and you were like, yo, I just went like 0 to 100. Like, I don't know where that came from. I remember last week I flipped out on one of the ER doctors, and he's also Orthodox. I was like, I'm so sorry. I feel so bad. I was like, Christos Anesti, but also, yo, mama. But the reason we sometimes overreact or we react in a way that is not appropriate to the stimulus is that you're not just reacting to the present. Hear me on this. You're reacting to both your past and your present. Does that make sense? Okay. Go on. The community around you, what we believe about koinonia, impacts also your healing. Go on. No problem. So there's this beautiful verse where the Lord says to us, you shall love your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And if we're going to ask ourselves, how do I love God with my mind if I don't truly know where my mind is thinking? Here's the question. So we don't see things as, here's sort of a key thought maybe that Abuna was sharing with them, is that you don't see things as they are, you see things as you are. You see things through the experiences that you've brought to the moment, and that, it's sort of like, have you ever worn colored glasses? Right? I know Menaros. Right? If you wear glasses that have a hint of red, how are you seeing the world? With a hint of red. In a lot of ways, your past experiences, what you've been through, are the lens by which you see the world around you. And if you think, like, isn't it so weird that the whole world has a little bit of red in it? You're like, no, man, you're just wearing glasses that have a little bit of a hint of red. What I see every single day from friends or also as patients is not realizing that we're wearing glasses that have a little bit of a tint. And you're like, oh, it's crazy that the world is like this, and not so much that I'm seeing through a different lens. Does that add up? Okay. So actually, go back one second. The question that they would ask here to Abuna is like, go on forward. Is like, do I really need a therapist though? Like, let's be honest, okay? I'm not like depressed. I'm functioning, I go to work, I'm remote, hybrid, I go to church is cool. Like, things are not that bad. And one of the things I was talking about with the servants is like, part of the idea of this talk is we can feel like, maybe this is not really for me. This is for the guy next to me. This guy needs some therapy, man. You don't even know. This girl, she needs therapy. Because we've historically looked at therapy as like last resort. Okay, things are gone totally off the deep end. Now we're in crisis. These are the kind of phone calls sometimes that I would get from a clergy friend. And he'd be like, Mina, things are totally wild right now in this person's life. Let's get them into therapy. I'm like, Abuna, that's great. But also, like, wouldn't it be great if we already had something going before the crisis hits? Right? So Abuna responds in this way. He says, Habibi, you're already pretending your friends are your therapists, you might as well go get a real one. How many of us have thought, I don't really need this kind of stuff or talk to somebody, but I talk to my friends? Anybody ever thought that? Like your friends are your therapists? We try to be therapists for each other. And I think we struggle with that because, let me just get a little comfortable since we're going to get really into it, This is with all due respect to all of us together as friends, right? But sometimes helping hurts. I was talking to somebody today who was expressing these feelings, right? They were saying, I'm not depressed, I just don't really do laundry like I used to. I don't really apply myself at work. I don't really sleep like I used to. Things that I love to do, I just don't really do them anymore. And as soon as he told his friends, all his friends was like, you're fine, man. You're fine. Everything's okay. Don't worry. You're fine. You're not depressed. Everything's okay. Sometimes the support that we have is fantastic. Like one of the strengths I think that we have as a community is our support for each other. But maybe we are not all licensed therapists. Maybe. Okay, just quick story time. I'm a fob, okay? I came to this wonderful country at a point in life, and I knew some English, but I didn't really know English like that. Especially, I lived in Brooklyn, so I had to learn Brooklyn English. Does the fact that I didn't know English mean that I'm dumb? And please be nice about that question. Did it mean that I was unintelligent? But it did mean that I can't communicate. I remember one particular example. I was going to get pizza, because that's what you do when you move to America. L&B, Brooklyn, get a spumoni and a slice. And I was like, I'm getting kind of thirsty and I want a drink. In Arabic, I ashrab, I told my uncle. He was like, okay, you go and tell them that you need woda. W-O-D-A, sorry. Right, isn't that how you spell water in New York? W-O-D-A. So I was like, I've never heard this word before. For Masr, it was water. Right? So I had to do whatever I could in ESL, and I went into ESL, of course. with all my FOBby ESL friends to learn English, to learn to communicate in this language. And again, you said to me that this didn't mean that I was bad or dumb or whatever, right? That's what you're saying about me? Well, thank you so much. That's very kind. Here's the thing. One more. We need ESL too. You and I need emotion as a second language because we don't learn how to actually be able to talk to each other. And when you look at how this impacts your work relationships, the people around you, it is exactly as if you're trying to ask somebody for water, but instead of saying the right colloquial thing, water, you said bips, you know? You just couldn't communicate it because a different language, emotional language, meaning what you feel, what is making you angry, what is making you tick, what is making you upset, what is giving you joy. You know these things don't just come naturally to you? You didn't just roll out of the womb just knowing how to say that? And let me do you one better. Sometimes we don't only have to just learn ESL, we got to unlearn some stuff. Because we've all, and I always feel like there's normal parenting, and then there's Egyptian parenting. We've all been through the experience, as joyful as it is, of Egyptian parenting. You learn some stuff, and me, I learned some stuff about the way to speak to somebody, the way to think about yourself, the way to speak to yourself, that is wild. Did you know that? It just feels like, well, we're all kind of in it together, so like, yeah, we're all speaking the same, like it's like as if we were, let's imagine if you were one parish and we all had an accent. Like we all said that our T's are Z's. It wouldn't make it correct, it would just mean that we all have an accent. ESL. Continue. Thank you. Here's the key thought here. One more time, please. We come into this world assembly required. You ever get something from like IKEA? God, I hope you don't, right? Or from Amazon or something, and you have to put it together, right? Your mind, your peace of mind, comes assembly required. The more effort, the more self-work we put in to holding on to, maintaining our own peace of mind and figuring out the tools to do that, the more likely we are to do that. That's why we can't be surprised if we buy this table and it comes assembly required, and then weeks later, it still looks like a bunch of wood sitting on the side. It's like, bro, you didn't assemble it. You didn't assemble it. And for you and I, as young Coptic people, or young people in general, if we don't learn how to assemble properly, we're missing out on how to properly use the table. Does that make sense? We come assembly required. Here's another key thought. Are you currently living in preventable drama? People sometimes tell me, oh, I have this kind of drama at work, or this kind of drama at home, or this kind of drama on the street. How much of the drama that we're living is actually preventable if we're able to take some time and assemble the proper tools? Food for thought. So now we're going to get into, as they are thinking about all these things and Abuna is walking them through, they're going to get into the journey of, all right, let me try to actually get some care and see what it's like. So the big question is, what does good treatment actually feel like, though? I want to visualize it, though. If you were to kind of picture it, and this, actually a patient told me once, and I'll never forget it. She said this. She said it's like this. Anybody here wear glasses? Like real ones? Right? Some people? You know when you wake up, a friend of mine once who wears glasses was like, Mina, you don't know what it's like to wake up. Like blurry, right? And I don't know what that's like. Do you know what it's like, though, when you wake up blurry and then you put on your glasses? Dope. Wow, I see the world. This is what it feels like. Not like the couch, not like the person strapping you to a thing. It feels like being able to see clearly. But what is it actually, though? Not just what it feels like, but what is it actually? It is this. The goal of therapy or mental health treatment or finding peace of mind is introducing you to yourself. Hi, my name is Mina, nice to meet you. Self, looking in the mirror. This picture is all of us, in one way or another. But the worst thing is, sometimes we don't even see, like I was speaking with a patient yesterday, And as they were describing all of the conflicts that are happening in their life, I'm like, so tell me sort of how you contributed to these conflicts. He was like, I didn't. It's like, wow. Let me introduce you to yourself. Does that make sense? It is very common and very easy to go through your life having never met yourself. It's one of the tragedies, I think, of life. Go on. This is how St. Basil puts it. He says, in truth, to know oneself seems to be the hardest of all things, the hardest of all things. Just as our eye, which observes external objects, does not use its own sense of sight upon itself, so too our mind, which contemplates so intently the sin and failing of others, is slow in the recognition of its own defects. Slow at best. He is kind to say that. I one time actually went to an ophthalmologist and he was like, what's that in your cornea here? I'm like, I don't know, bro, I can't see my cornea. You're the one looking at my eye. I needed somebody else to look at my eye and say what's going on in my eye. And St. Basil's point is really driving it home. Don't miss it from either Homer Simpson or St. Basil, whichever one you want to choose. You know, whoever is more inspirational for you, it's no problem. Have a resolve to say, I will know myself, no matter what. And I think what Mark and Mary, our little fictional friends, are saying is, in order for me to have peace of mind, I will know myself. And God has to reveal yourself to you. And this is part of the idea of therapy. In the framework of therapy is that our emotions impact our thoughts impact our behaviors, and this loop that if you're not aware of, have you ever said this to yourself? I promise you have. I don't know 90% of you. I did that, but I don't know why I did that. I don't know why I said that. I regret that. I don't know why I said that. That's not me, but I said that. Part of this is that we're not seeing the loop, is that what you said or what you did is not the beginning of the story. It is the end of the story. It is the final part of the story. It's the final scene. But there was a thought, and there was a feeling, and there was all of these things that finally came out into this. In therapy, or all these other things that we're going to talk about, in mental health treatment, you dissect this now. And you say, my behavior has a reason. What I do for a reason. I'm not just on autopilot. Anybody hear of like a Tesla? Right? It can just drive itself, right? It's great. It's a nice thing. Your mind is not a Tesla. Your mind has very specific reasons why it does what it does. Cool? Here's what therapy's not, though. This is important because a lot of people just ask this, like, I don't need to sit there and like vent to somebody and just like whine to them all day, or complain, talking about my week, or get advice actually. Like, should I get this job or that job? We think sometimes of therapy the same way that we would of like confession. It's like, Abuna, like the blue shirt or the red shirt, right? And Abuna's like, I don't care. They both look dumb. So it's not actually, so that's the thing, is that in therapy or in mental health treatment, the idea is not someone is going to tell you how to live your life. This is actually important because sometimes people ask, well, what if the therapist isn't aligned with my values? A good therapist isn't telling you how to carry out your values. A good therapist is making you think about your own values, and are your choices in line with your own values? See the difference? We sometimes think, if I was to go to a therapist and they were to say, take this job, marry this boy. But it can't work like that. What their job is to help you think through your own thing, if they're doing it correctly. One more, go ahead. Here are the key thoughts here. Is our thoughts become our actions become our habits, and our habits become our lives. And how this happens is how we obtain and keep peace of mind. Go ahead. Here's the thing though, even when somebody sort of comes around and agrees and says, okay, I'm going to go ahead and take the plunge and do this, people will often feel like guilty. Like, let's be honest, right? You don't have to raise your hand for this. But if I was to take a poll and say, okay, how many of us are in therapy? Like, yeah, you know what I mean? We're not doing that. We're not saying, of course, yes, of course. We still haven't got to the point as a society or even as a community of being able to say, treatment, the same way that if you were to get a physical, like to prevent things that are going wrong, doesn't mean that you're unhealthy. It means that you're actually healthy. So when we're dealing with this guilt, maybe, or this shame, one thing that I've often sort of heard reiterated is this beautiful passage in John 9, where the disciples asked Jesus, they saw a guy who was sick, and they said, who sinned that this guy is sick? When we try to sort of analyze people, they say, this guy has a problem. Akid, his mom was, it's probably, he had bad servants. If only he had the right, but here Jesus says, neither this man nor his servants nor his parents sinned, and that sickness is not a sin. We all want to let that sink deep down into our hearts, is that when we struggle with something, there's a big difference. Even sin, though, even if it was sin, there's an answer to sin, right? That's what the scripture says. But it's important to know what is a sin and what is not. What is a matter of the result of the fall, right? So we don't want to be feeling guilty about this. There's another thing, too. Part of the treatment, or part of the question in treatment, is that medicine is not a sin. Go on. This is a sign that's out of the hospital. It's New York Presbyterian, where it says, for of the Most High cometh healing. I don't know if you can see it. It's a little bit blurry in the back, but this is like a large secular hospital. They don't care about God or anything. But it's too late. They can't take this down. Okay? And I don't care that. You know I said it, so I don't care. But still, it's built on this principle that no matter what you do, no matter what grants you get, or NIH, or whatever, healing cometh from the Most High. Peace of mind, right, Jesus said, is a peace that I give you that no one else gives. Peace of mind has one source, and that is the person of Christ. We'll go through some verses real quick. So honor the physician with the honor due to him, according to your need for him. For the Lord created him, for healing comes from the Most High. That's where the verse comes from. And the Lord created medicine from the earth, and a sensible man will not despise them. Was not water made sweet with a tree in order that his power might be known? And he gave skill to man that he might be glorified in his marvelous works. This is to say, because one thing is when we're talking about therapy. Like, all right, I can sort of jive with the therapy piece. We're talking about medicine. Oh, this is big time talk now. And again, for context, what I do for most of my day is determine whether or not somebody needs medicine, in addition to all the other stuff, in addition to their spiritual life and their community and their diet. Again, on the surface of things, we are advanced, learned, you know what I mean? People who are saying, of course, medicine is not a sin, of course. But would I take it if I had to? I mean, of course not. Of course. Why would I? You know what I mean? If push comes to shove and you're in your own life and you're talking about the question of medicine for you, for your own healing, there's still a part of us that doesn't really believe all these verses. It's like, I don't know, man. And when I try to talk about medicine on social media, anybody here have TikTok? It is from the devil. So I actually like TikTok a lot. I do a lot of stuff on TikTok. And anytime I mention the word medicine, they're like, Big Pharma, they're paying all your... Like, I wish I got a check from Big Pharma. I haven't gotten a dime. Like a sandwich maybe or something. Remember how I told you in the beginning there's a national, there's a general distrust you have of doctors? Like, these guys all, Fauci and these guys, what do we know? Even though it's less for us here in New York. When we're talking about medicine, this becomes highlighted. So we're going to try to unpack that a little bit more in treatment. So here's what they did, though. They looked for a therapist, and then they found this list of people. They found a life coach, an MFT, an LCSW, an LPC, NCC, LCAT, APN, DO, MD, continue, PhD, continue, PsyD. You know that commercial where it's like people just speak in acronyms? They're like BRB, LOL is like, TGIF. I don't know what it actually said, but it's something like that, right? And it's like it was a Geico or something in the end. But doesn't this look like a maze? And this is the part where I sort of want to be honest with you as, anybody here in mental health? Just so I know. Oh, thank God. So I can tell you whatever. No, but I'll tell you, this is where I apologize to you on behalf of the mental health world, because this is a disaster. And when people try to actually get care, and they're like, all right, I'm sold, man. You got me on the analogies, you got me on the Homer Simpson picture, and now I'm going to go ahead and go find care. And it's like, what is this alphabet soup? We're going to unpack it a little bit. What's all this gibberish? Let's go through it. So a life coach, anybody hear of this before? Like on social media and stuff, right? It's very common. We're going to talk more about their training. Continue. An MFT is someone who is a marriage and family therapist. An LCSW is a licensed clinical social worker. An LPC is a licensed professional counselor. An LCAT is a licensed creative arts therapist. An APN is an advanced practice nurse. A DO or MD, doctor of osteopathy, or medical doctor, these are psychiatrists who prescribe medicine as opposed to a psychologist who is, continue? Yeah, continue? Yeah, PhD or PsyD are psychologists. Does this part make sense? I'm going to elaborate a bit more, just like why would I use any of these? What would be a situation where somebody like this can help me? So starting with a life coach. So a life coach, because there's no formal training, like good news, if any of you decided today, I want to be a life coach, you can be a life coach. And that's exactly how it goes. People are just like, you know, you just meet people sometimes, you're like, oh yeah, I'm a life coach. How long have you been doing it? I don't know, last week I decided I'm a life coach. Power to you, bro. Okay, cool. So this is not to say that they're not useful, okay? Because there's actually a couple of Orthodox life coaches. Like if you're a young woman and you want to navigate like young woman life, like Tasoni Lillian has a great sort of life coaching thing. Just want to give her a shout out. And there are other sort of Orthodox or Christian life coaches where they could be useful. They could be cool. But just to know what you're getting, right? Because it's sort of like, you know, I'm a sports guy, right? So positions in sports, like you know how one guy in basketball is like a huge guy and like a center? One guy maybe could be smaller and can be dribbling. If you make the big guy dribble, they're not going to do it well. Life coaches can be useful, but they're not therapists. Does that make sense? They're not giving you clinical care. They're giving you life advice. They're walking you through stuff. They can have good experience, but know that you're not looking at credentials and being like, oh, of course, you went to Life Coach University? That's dope. That's like you got an advanced degree in life coaching, which there are now, but anyway. So there could be a mentor, go on. And it's important here, definitely, to have aligned goals with somebody who's a life coach because they have no other credentialing. And as I said, there are several great Orthodox ones. This is typically out of pocket, not reimbursed by insurance because, again, it's not a clinical service. Go on. Different therapists. So an LCAT, this is nice. Anybody hear about this before? Cool. All right, something new. So for some people, like not me, but you could be more inclined to express yourself in art, right? You may not have the words for stuff, but you may want to like draw something out or like, you know, have them go through it in an artistic way. This could be cool for you, that you don't want to sit there and talk, but you want to express through art. So licensed clinical art therapist is a clinician, so this can be an insurance service. This is a real clinical service, but it's geared towards expressing yourself through art. Then MFTs are more focused on relationships. And then the others that we were saying, when I lump them together, the LCSWs or MSW or LPC or NCC, these are all similar training. You can always Google sort of the extent to which they have training, but they're basically like master's level therapists, where depending on their background or their experience or kind of what they've been through, they can jive with you well or not. But that's kind of the extent of their background, okay? Go ahead. And then PsyD is a doctorate level person, and then PhD is sort of the most rigorous. This is a traditional psychologist when you think about people, you know, laying on a couch kind of deal. Does this make sense? So there's different options, and go back for a second, or go forward, maybe. Of these, the most important thing is that you feel like you connect with the person. If it's good if they're, and I'll show you an Orthodox directory of people that you'll be able to find as well. That's the biggest piece that sort of indicates how well you'll do with somebody. But if you can choose, if you want somebody with more training, that's how I would sort of think through this. That's what I did when I was looking for my own therapist. I was like, okay, I want a PhD. I want an old white woman. That's sort of my go-to demographic. Why old white woman? That's just weird. Go for it. How about prescribing medicine? These are the folks here. You go through a physician assistant or a PA. We're familiar with this term. Anybody here a PA? All right, some people, okay. Go on. So they typically would work, actually go back one second. A PA would typically work with a doctor. They don't necessarily have to have subspecialty training in psychiatry. They can have some flexibility there. One more?
It doesn't come up.
Oh, nurse one didn't come? Okay. The nurse one was the APN, which is probably the most common thing that you would find because there's a big shortage of psychiatrists, so there's a lot of advanced practice nurses. Why do I tell you about these kind? Go ahead. Why do I tell you between psychiatrist, APN, PA? Is because, again, I love everybody in the field. I think everybody is fantastic. But you want to be aware. Let's say I had somebody actually that I had to let go at work because she was a little bit misrepresenting sort of her skill set, right, to people. And what I mean there is, you want to know, is the person that you're seeing, do they have experience in psychiatry? If they say I'm Dr. So-and-so, does that mean they are a physician, or does that mean they are an MP? It's okay if they're an MP, it's okay if they're a PA, but you want to know the difference at least. Does that make sense? Because it's important for you. And again, to tell you that I'm not like biased, you can get awesome care from anybody, and you can get terrible care from anybody. So it's not like you go to a psychiatrist, you get great care, and then you go to an APN, you get terrible care. It's not exactly it, or the reverse either. Go ahead. So how do we find these people? Whenever we're looking at, okay, should I try to go, how do I actually try to find care? Here's the question. Where to search? Go on. In New York City, we're lucky we have this thing called NYC Well. If you've ever used it, it's a very helpful service that you can call, you can text. We also have Psychology Today, which is a service that you can filter by your own insurance, by gender, by age, by specialty. And even more excitingly, there is this Orthodox Mental Health Directory. If you just Googled Orthodox Mental Health Directory, this is national. You'll find me in the New York, New Jersey part. Psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health people with really great backgrounds that are Orthodox. And it's super cool. So I would start there. You can also get a list from your insurance. There was actually a great episode, this YouTube show, the Hassan Minhaj guy, right? He did a show about how sometimes when we get a list from insurance providers, it turned out to be not accurate. Like some of the numbers on there were like McDonald's. Like they really went through. It was like, they really gave us a list from McDonald's? All right, I'll have a number 3. I mean, I don't know. With mac sauce. So you can get a list from your own insurance. You can say to your insurance, I want a list of therapists in my area. I want a list of psychiatrists, and they'll give it to you. But some of them may be like dead already. Like that just sometimes happens. It's not always the most up-to-date list. I know it's a little morbid, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What do I ask though? Okay, so I'm meeting somebody for the first time. What are things to keep in mind that I want to know? Getting to know a psychiatrist or a therapist or somebody that you're going to pour out your life to, here are a couple things. You have this intro conversation to talk about what you need help with. You want to talk about your perspective on faith. Because if you're seeing an Orthodox therapist, great. If you're seeing somebody who's not aligned with your faith, but you want to know at least that they respect your faith, they can incorporate it. There is, remember I mentioned to you CBT? There is Christian CBT, by the way. Like there are principles. There's a really nice book on Christian CBT. But at the very least, you want to know where they're aligned about your faith. You want to know how much stuff costs. This is another area where I'll apologize. Between New York and New Jersey, sometimes it's expensive. I look at it as like an investment, right? Because we invest in lots of stuff, and the data tells us is that when we have peace of mind, it's actually correlated with more income for us over the long run, just from a straight financial standpoint, in addition to all the other benefits. But there's actual sort of numerical value. And you also want to check your insurance. A lot of people that I see won't necessarily even know this. Like you may have out-of-network benefits where your insurance will pay 100%, 80% of somebody who is not in your network. And you want to know how often you'll be meeting, whether it's weekly or more or less, or if it's in person or online. Go ahead. So this picture is more in line, less about the couch, right? These are also like stock images, 2 white people meeting together. But it's kind of what therapy looks like. You're just like 2 people sitting and talking. Whether it's therapy or psychiatry, it just looks like this. The initial conversation can be up to 60 minutes. The questions can be getting to know you, a bit about your experiences, your medical history, what your life was like. Again, how the past led you to the present. So then this leads to questions that people have sometimes about medicine. That the hesitation, somebody will say, I've really been like in a clinical tough space, or a friend of mine has been in a clinical tough space where they need treatment, they need medicine, but they wonder, is it forever, for example? And the answer is no. The standard of care for a lot of these medicines is you start for a period, you reevaluate in a couple months, you may or may not need it forever. If you continue to have episodes, you may want to stay on it, but it's just to reassure you, it's not like autopilot. You do something and then you're going to be on this kind of thing forever. That's for common mental illnesses. But again, if you're talking about a cousin with schizophrenia, actually, interesting thing, like I was dealing with somebody in the ER today who had a hypertensive crisis. You know how like our parents, for example, if they have like sukar or daght or whatever, right, like hypertension or diabetes. Imagine if we had a medicine for diabetes where you can give somebody a shot one time in 6 months. Wouldn't that be awesome? That would be like Nobel Prize winning stuff. It's on the way, I got it. But in bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, we have that. So that's to encourage you for that second cousin that you never see anymore. When you're like, oh man, he really needs some help. Go. Another question people have is, will I be a zombie? Is it going to zonk me out? Is it going to be just like, I'm taking a medicine and like nobody's home, right? And the approach to medicine is this. This is how you would want to approach it if you're speaking with someone who you may potentially take medication, or somebody, a friend of yours is considering taking medication too. It would be this. You should be a part of the plan with the person who's prescribing you medicine. It shouldn't be like you come in, here's a script for whatever, okay? And it should be starting low and going slow. Medication for anxiety and depression, the most common people that you will prescribe it to you are your primary doctors, right? And the most common thing that happens is that you're going to be started on way too high of a dose. And you're going to take it, and you say, oh my goodness, I don't know why I ever listened to that Mina guy. This is the worst. It's tearing up my stomach. I'm never taking these medicines again. When we start at a high dose, it doesn't make it work any faster, but it just gives you bad side effects. So just keep that in mind. If you or someone else was like, oh, medicine, start low, go slow. And talk about side effects. I've had a lot of patients who come and see me and be like, I took the medicine and I hate it, so I stopped it like 6 months ago. Like, hey, cool, maybe tell me. Maybe call me and we can talk about alternatives, right? Doesn't change who you are, doesn't change your personality. It removes the barrier so you can feel more like yourself. Okay, continue. Side note, just because we're also sort of an addiction pandemic, chances are, and this I guess you can raise your hand, do you know, not even personally or just professionally, or have you come across someone who struggled with addiction? Right? A lot of people. What people don't often know, I was talking to my friends, is that there are actually, when we think about addiction, we think about like AA, right? Or like groups therapy. But people don't know that there are medications for addictions. Whether it is spiritual care and AA groups, alcohol, opiates, marijuana, these things, again, in addition to all the other stuff, if there's a medicine that can decrease the use of that, marijuana being the biggest one, I have never seen so many people smoking so much weed and trying to convince me that, like, stop prescribing medicine. Weed, natural. From the earth, baby. And I'm like, man, you know stuff from the earth can kill you? Since when is the earth? So you have a friend, for sure, who's smoking way too much weed. And what I tell people who are smoking too much weed is, you will prescribe yourself this medication. That's cool. That's on you. But I just want to tell you, I have alternatives. And if I can offer you something better, that is more effective, because you're smoking weed so you can sleep. You're smoking weed because your thoughts are racing. You're smoking weed because you're anxious. Hitting home kind of a little bit. So you have a friend, right? So when they tell you that, the take-home message is, there's something better, more effective, with less side effects. And if they believe you, then you can actually get them to care. Okay? How do I know I'm getting good care? This is an important question, because again, one of the devastating things, one of the servants in the church in New York was working with them, and like one of the youth, getting them care, and then we finally got them to go to get care, and it was awful. And the person was atrocious. And I'm like, oh, sorry. That's a reality too, is that if you, or somebody you know, because mental health people are kind of weird, okay? We are. I don't know how else to say it. So sometimes you can meet somebody, whether a therapist or psychiatrist, and they could be super weird. Try not to get turned off, but try to look for these things. Try to look for, are we spending time in a visit? Is it just 3 minutes, you're coming in, medicine, boom? Is it rushed? Is the prescribing habit? This is, again, one of the warnings that I want to give you, right? Is if you do go to somebody, and every time you feel something, there's a different medicine for what you feel, that's not the way medicine is supposed to go. That's not for us as Orthodox Christians, it's not what we believe. And even for good clinicians, that's not the way we believe either. But some people do that, okay? And actually not just people, but big companies. One of the companies is in the news now because they were specifically, a company called Cerebral, specifically increasing controlled substance prescriptions for people so they can keep them coming back. It is a great drug dealer model. Just give you addictive medicine so you can keep coming back. So be careful with that too. Sorry, go ahead. And that you're asking questions and they're being answered. And that you're a part of the plan. And the plan is not just medicine, okay? Because again, what we believe as Orthodox Christians is that all of these things are equally important. The medicine piece, the therapy piece, the community piece, the diet piece, the spiritual piece, these are all components of the one whole. Because as C.S. Lewis said, you are, I don't want to misquote him. I'll just say that all these components of us, right, like our soul, our body, our mind, they make up who we are, and not one of them is more important than the other. I think that was it. I have a contact slide. Should I do, I don't know what our time is, if I go bonus slide. Let's do one bonus slide. I wasn't sure if I had time for this, which is, how do I know if I should be on medication? This is a question that people will ask me. And part of the thing to think about are these 4 Ds, which is the duration, how long these symptoms have been there, the depth, sort of how intense the feeling is. All of us can get anxious, but if you're feeling panic attacks, that's a different level, from 0 to 10 kind of depth of intensity. How frequent this is happening. We can all have a bad day. Things can be a little bit tough, but if you're having a bad day every day, if you're having a struggling day every single day, it's a daily occurrence. Another one is duty. The patient was telling me this morning, is this is clearly impacting their work. It's clearly impacting their school. When it gets in the way of your duty, it's a big thing to think about. And then lastly, danger. Okay, when we get to the point where, and this can be subtle, right? It may not be like, okay, I'm gonna go, do something drastic, but it's like, sometimes I feel like life isn't worth living, I just feel like I could sleep and not be bothered with stuff, It would just be easier to just not have to bother with these things. So these
Beginning that you could utilize the Menti website. It is menti.smsm.nyc. Go on your web bar and type in menti.smsm.nyc. I'm going to read a few questions to start us off. Thank you so much, Mina. First question is, give me 1 second. Okay, we'll start with this one. How does taking medication help you address the underlying causes of issues? Example, toxic family.
Yeah, great question. So here's how. If you have a toxic situation around you, whatever that may be, family, friends, it's one thing if you're trying, let's say for example, to outrun a tough situation with a broken leg. Versus if you're trying to outrun that situation with your legs going fine. You're stretching, you're like Mina, doing marathons all day. So isn't gonna change them? No, but when it changes you, then you now are in a better position to be able to think about what's going on. How do I respond? Because people around us are not people that we can change, but you are always gonna be able to control how you respond. And sometimes when you have come to a point where you've reached clinical illness, you're not going to be able to respond adequately and appropriately or deal with the toxicity around you. And that's a great point that whoever's asking too about sort of core, is because the idea is not to just mask stuff, is not Band-Aid to just move on. But the idea is to be in a place where you can deal with these things the best possible way.
Awesome, thank you. Next question is a little long. What do you tell people who think individual treatment doesn't address the real causes of their problems and doesn't address the failed toxic EG culture, this person wrote, Egyptian culture that perpetuates the larger problem?
In some ways, we're all sort of a product of our environment. That's true. Whether it's toxic EG culture or toxic American culture or toxic New York City culture. But nonetheless, like, you got to deal with where you're at, right? So if you're not going to be at a point where you're going to look at your mirror and see how am I addressing the things that I need to address, especially in light of knowing that some of the things in our culture could have been damaging to you, the way you understand yourself and others. So it's all the more reason, if you're more aware that, are you going to fix the culture? Are you going to fix like the root cause of the culture? No, but you really can uproot a lot of these things from your own life. And again, not everything in our culture is bad. A lot of stuff in our culture is beautiful, even like ethnically, right? Community and mulukhaya and stuff, like a lot of stuff, right? But the things that have residual impact, parenting and stuff like that, the more time we invest at least like figuring it out and seeing it for what it is, the less you're more likely to repeat the mistakes of the culture. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So I have two questions. So what percentage of people that seek medical treatment usually actually need medication versus the ones that don't?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have hard data, but I would say the vast majority of people do not need medication. By and large, when you look at just like depression, for example, depression is the leading cause of disability in the world, right? But you don't have the whole world on depression medication, or everybody who's dealing with depression. So most people actually, I don't feel comfortable giving a number per se, but I would say most people don't get to a point of needing medication, and it sometimes can be sort of a stepwise approach, is that maybe I begin, because a big question is, when someone asks me, is like, even with all these slides and the 4 or 5 Ds, I still don't know if I need medication. And I say, of course you don't, because I have to answer that question for you. You know what I'm saying? So even when there's a question, and again, most of the time the question is no, and the question could be, or the answer could be, you know what, let's start with therapy. You want to let somebody professional answer that question for you. Let's make a plan together. Where are we? That like, okay, what can we put in place? And medicine is certainly not the first thing.
So I mean, do you mean like MDD, or do you mean just like you just define those? Like,
Yeah.
Like major depression versus like clinical, like DSM definitions versus
Yeah.
what else you're talking about? 'Cause
Sure.
I'm not even sure. What do you mean by like depression that's not treated by medication?
Yeah, I know. For like physicians, that's like sort of a wonky concept. Like, how could it not be, right? But the reality is, most people who see therapists, like a significant percentage of people, who either have major depressive disorder, but they're not currently in a major depressive episode. Maybe that's a distinguishing factor that I can clarify for everybody. You can have depression, right? Major depressive disorder, but not be in the middle of an episode where, like, right now, for the past 2 weeks, you've been totally non-functioning, you're not leaving the house, you lost all your interest, you're thinking about harming yourself. This is like the thick of the episode. In these situations, that's where, like, okay, we need medication for this situation. But oftentimes, well, I've experienced this episode here and there, I've experienced these symptoms at other points, and there are enough clinical symptoms where I need to be seeing a therapist, or I need to be able to get help, but not necessarily be on medication at the moment. Or I was on medication, I went through the depressive episode, and now I'm off medication, and I'm being maintained in therapy. That's also a very common scenario that I want people to be aware of, that we encourage.
Wait.
MDD, you're talking about like a biological underpinning to that depression, right?
Yes,
So then this therapy, I don't even know this.
yes,
Therapy can show how to
yes,
change the biological. Okay.
yes, that's what's kind of,
Mina, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, and I'm very happy that you guys are eager. No, it's okay, and I'm happy that you guys are excited. But please utilize the Menti, because we have a lot of questions coming in. And just a reminder also, next week, going to announce this now really quickly, we're going to have a panel of professionals. So we're going to try to get through as many questions as possible, but today we had a late start because of technical difficulties. So I'm going to run through the questions, and if we don't address them tonight, I promise you we will make sure to incorporate them next week in the panel. So I will go on to the next question. What do you tell people who are too quick to ask for drug treatment, and to others who say that prescribed drugs can cause PSSD in some people?
Yeah, to people who say there are providers who are too quick to get medication, this is a phenomenon that's true. So I wouldn't deny that. Because depending on who you talk to, depending on who you get care from, some people, as I said, are going to give you good care, people are going to give you bad care. So if you go to somebody and off the bat, they're like, all right, here are these 5 meds, bad care, okay? Big warning sign, that's not the way it should be. It should be a whole plan, it should be blah, 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 right? So we should be cautious about that. Whether it's somebody starting medicine for you too quickly, too easily, or too many medications, these are things that we should be careful of. The other thing is, whenever we're starting a medication, we have to be careful about how we come off of a medication. It has to be very careful and slow in the SD kind of question. But again, when you're with close monitoring and when you're with somebody who is keeping an eye on what you're doing, I don't have people who have experienced that, for example. Yeah.
Thank you. And really quickly, someone asked how long, and I know you brushed up on this, but maybe you could reiterate, how long does it take for these medications to work effectively, and how long does it take to get off of them? I heard it's years.
Definitely not years. Great question, though. So how long does it take to work effectively? When you begin a medication, let's say today, at a low dose and you go slowly, for it to be at its peak, it's going to take 4 to 6 weeks. But it will oftentimes begin working within week 2, week 3. Often, I see people get response at that juncture and as we're moving up. And you can be on a very low dose at that point too, at the 4 to 6 week period, which sounds like a long time, but depending on what you're being treated for, whether it's anxiety or it's depression or other things, there are some things that can work a little bit quicker and can sort of be the bridge for you. And to the second question, how long does it take to come off? It's definitely not years. I take people off these medications every single day, right? Usually, we go gradually, about 2 months. We go a small percentage down each week, see how you're feeling, continue to go that direction. And most people, again, that I see, when you go gradually and you reassess, see what's going on, people do very well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Someone wrote, you mentioned impaired function. Can I start with an occupational therapist, or should I go straight to a psychologist? I don't know. I don't have too much context on that.
I mean, impaired function, if it's something that's strictly in regards, I don't work as much with occupational therapists,
Right.
so I don't have as much background there. But it depends, I think, if your function is impaired because you feel like you can't do the work, meaning your motivation, your energy, your focus, your attention, all these things that are sort of within you, but not have to do with the job itself. My understanding of occupational therapy is that they sort of can work with you through the specific job that you're in. Anybody here? OT? Anybody? Yeah? Students, okay. Is that fair to say that you sort of work within the context of the occupation?
Yeah, as long as like the occupation itself is what's being affected and you're working at, we're targeting that specific occupation.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's how I would differentiate it. Like if I'm just not doing the occupation correctly because of an issue with the occupation, I would go the OT route, whether it's mechanically or things like that. But if it's more so internally that I don't have the energy, motivation, focus, attention, then I would start with somebody in the mental health route.
I'm going to go to the next question. I've heard that psychiatrists are sometimes quick to assign a diagnosis and permanently label that person. Can you comment on this?
Again, quick to label, I would say this. When you're seeing someone, part of the question in their mind is going to be, is there a diagnostic criteria? Is there a diagnosis that explains the behavior that is being seen? That's part of the goal of the evaluation, right? But in terms of like labeling you or what this means for you in other areas of your life, think about it this way. If you have, and you're struggling with depression, for example, major depressive disorder, you can go about your life not having been labeled with this and not getting sort of the support and the resources necessary for it, But in general, a diagnosis is not something that's made in 10 minutes. That's why I was saying the initial evaluation should be like an hour. And in general also, it's not always made in the first conversation, in the first hour, because it takes a lot, it takes an idea to get to know a lot about you to reach a point of making a diagnosis. It's not just that you tick a couple of different boxes and boom. But again, going back to, does this happen? Is it bad care? Yes. If you talk to somebody for 10 minutes and they say, anxiety, okay, I shouldn't go back to that person. Bad care. Bad care, good care? Bad care is very possible.
So I'm going to group these two questions together because I think they layer in. How do you approach people who clearly need help but refuse to do it? And how do you recommend helping somebody who you know is struggling with addiction?
Yeah, for the first part, we talk about this a lot, sort of with friends. One approach sometimes is to actually humble yourself a little bit when I talk to people. And that's why I told you I have a therapist. I don't have to tell you that, right? But I don't see it as a weakness in myself. I see it as doing my own self-work. So if you were to say, like I was actually just talking to somebody at work who was part of the staff, and he was like, oh, I'm really struggling with my brother. You know, I can't get him to get help. And every time I talk to him, he says to me, like, you should get help. I'm like, yeah, so you should. Why don't you begin that? Begin with saying, no, I should get help, and maybe you should get help too, and maybe we can get help together. So aligning yourself with somebody is sort of a beginning point, not like, I think you need therapy. I have it all together. I attended a talk once on Monday night, and now I know things, and now you don't. You know what I mean? So that's the first thing. And again, the nature of the help, right? Like, if it's a help with something like anxiety, depression, ADHD, that kind of stuff, is more of a conversation. If it's help that is more dangerous, more serious mental illness, an important thing for us to keep in mind is that there is a role for the hospital system where you can literally get a crisis worker to come out to the home, assess the person, evaluate them, bring them to the hospital. Because people who are, and this happens to Coptic people all the time, people who are struggling with like a manic episode, meaning like they're really going through a bipolar crisis, can't think correctly or can't think objectively to be able to have a conversation with you. Like, oh yeah, medicine is cool or not cool. So that's why, and actually I was explaining this to a parent on the phone or on video earlier today at work, is part of my responsibility as a psychiatrist is if I feel like your life is in danger, I have to keep you in the hospital against your will. That can be scary for people. Try to do it with kindness, but that's part of the responsibility that we have for people who have, again, this is more so in the psychosis, schizophrenia, bipolar, but I want you to just be aware of that, is that people who are in that boat don't always have to consent to treatment, especially if they're in crisis. They sometimes can initially get treatment against their will.
Someone asked, what's PSSD?
It's it's basically the syndrome that happens after coming off of SSRIs, which are medications for anxiety and depression, where you can start to have withdrawal symptoms, basically.
Okay.
So these symptoms, what people often do, this is a very common scenario, right? I start medicine, I feel fantastic, I stop medicine. Because now I feel better. It was like sort of taking an antibiotic. But these medications are not like antibiotics, is that you should not start them and then decide I'm better now and I should stop them.
Perfect, thank you. Someone wrote, should in the first line of defense be cognitive behavior therapy and not medication, which has its own slew of issues?
Yes. No,
Nice and easy.
yeah, I mean, that's why it is and I'll sort of indirectly then address John's point, is that for the reason it is the first line of defense is that there is clinical evidence that it has an impact on a biological problem that is major depressive disorder, which is amazing, is that, you know, this idea of your thoughts change your life is biologically true. Like the thoughts that you think about yourself actually begin to have a physiologic difference in your life. So that's why therapy is the first line of defense, essentially. And oftentimes the therapist is the one who'll be able to tell you, okay, you know what, we're doing great, let's continue therapy. Or, hey, you know what, I know a great psychiatrist, let me send you to somebody.
Perfect, thank you. Someone wrote, what if you accepted the need and benefit of mental health and share that with your loved ones, but they put you down or even make fun of you for it? Best way to tune it out and stay focused.
Yeah, this is something I think, like if you fell asleep the whole time, just wake up for 1 second for me. Because this is where all of us can sort of help each other. We as a community, it may not happen everywhere, It may not happen every single parish, but if we decide first, and that's why we're so open, we have a whole month about it or whatever, and if this actually translates to like, you know, the time when we hang out after this and play ping pong and stuff, and someone says that, yeah, you know what, I've been thinking about this and I think it's time for me to actually talk to somebody. Our response is super important. Our response of saying like, hey man, that's cool, you know? That's cool, me too. I've been thinking about it, whatever, or, you know, I want to think about ways that I can grow or better myself too, or whatever, that kind of thing. So as a community, that's super important for us. And then as a church, when you're seeing this from Abuna and the servants, and there's that kind of encouragement, and the bishop, right? That's why we have a church clinic in Jersey. But as an individual, you want to say, hey, it's the same thing that sometimes there's downsides to our community too. Sometimes people are not going to be kind. Sometimes people are not going to be supportive. Focus on the fact that there are other people who are going to be supportive. If I ever need encouragement, I talk to Menardos. He always, you know, yeah, life coach for real. Yeah. So that's the thing is we want to try to surround ourselves with people who are going to be supportive also, and we want to become that support for each other.
Thank you. Someone asked, I'm going to group them. Would you recommend using the mental health app Headspace? And someone also asked, what percentage of patients are currently on some sort of medication? You don't have to.
Yeah.
Whatever you feel comfortable.
Sure. So for apps like Headspace or Talk Something or BetterHelp or these things, it's a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of people's sort of reactions or experiences. Would I strongly recommend it? I'm sort of neutral. That's what I'll tell you me personally. The good thing about it is that it can be more immediate. You can sort of reach somebody a little bit quicker. The bad thing about it is it can be a little inconsistent. Some feedback that I've gotten from people is that you can get matched with a therapist and then sort of unmatched and then change and unchange, you know, have a lot of sort of turnover there with the therapist. So that's sort of the downside. But is it worth a try? That's not a bad idea. I've had people who have good experiences because the key is the connection that you make with a therapist. That's sort of the biggest thing. Someone that you'd be able to really be honest with fully. And to the question, I think it's more whether from Headspace or elsewhere, like how many people are on medication. Like I said, it's not the majority of people. The majority of people do not go on medication.
Thank you. So someone else asked, and I think this is very important, and I'll group these two. How can we, actually I'll start with this one. Shouldn't you treat the spirit and body first? Then if the issue persists, you move on to the mind, i.e. therapy. So to know if you need medicine, you see first if you worked on the other two first. And then another question which ties into it, how can we tie it back to spirituality? It's important to process your issues with Christ as well as faith. When do you know the limit between relying on therapy primarily or faith?
Yeah, great questions. So I would say this. There isn't going to be a point where we're going to stop getting spiritual care and stop getting physical care and saying, look, you know, I went to confession, I confessed, and I'm done, and now I'm just going to focus on therapy for a while. We're not saying that. That should not be the approach that we do it. And that's why I told you in the slides there from Abuna, starting spiritually is an important component. Continuing spiritually is an important component. So it's not either or. It's not therapist or confession. It's not medication or like not eating McDonald's. It's not either of those things. It's together. Because there's actually, I didn't put this slide, it was another slide set, but there's actually thousands of studies that show when you're incorporating the spirituality, faith, it has a direct positive impact on how you're treating depression and anxiety, that it actually makes it better. So again, the spiritual walk is medicine. The food we're eating is medicine. The therapy we're getting is medicine. See what I'm saying? We often sometimes think in this sort of black and white way. It's like, is it God or is it medicine? Is it God or is it therapy? Is it, you know, but that's not the way God invites us to think about things. God invites us to think about the complete picture, right? And that's why it always comes back to Christ. Because, and that's why I'm sort of to tie a bow on it. Like one Orthodox priest, Father Thomas Hopko, would say, when I take my medication, I pray, and he's taking medication for sugar or whatever, diabetes or whatever, and like I am praying because this is now like the same way I'm blessing the bread that I'm going to give as like barakah for people. That the Lord would bless this medication because it is from him that he's going to give me this as a method of him giving me his own healing. You know what I'm saying? So imagine if the same way, like we pray over our food, right? But pray over like celery instead of, processed whatever that we're eating. So it's not either or, it's both. The more we can sort of internalize that, the better.
Thank you so much. We have obviously a lot more questions, but for the sake of time, because we did start late today, we are going to end our session here. And just a reminder, I'm announcing, and Jackie will reiterate that in her announcements, is we will have a panel professional mental health experts. So the link will be menti.smsm.nyc. That should be live by tomorrow. We're not going to use tonight's. We're going to use tomorrow's, and we'll incorporate the rest of tonight's questions. And you'll have all week to come up with questions, so then we can present it to our professional panel. And right now, Jackie will do the announcements.
Thank you. Thank you, Mina. That was great. Okay. Couple of quick announcements, but first and foremost, I just want to say welcome to everyone. It's really nice to see all of your beautiful faces. Just to introduce myself, I'm Jackie. I'm one of the servants. We have Menardos, Abba, Sandy, I know is in the back, Celine, and Monica. I think those are all the servants that I saw tonight. If you guys want to just raise your hands. If you have any questions, or if it's your first time, you want it to be added to anything, feel free to grab one of us. Also, this is a great time since we're all slowly reuniting in person. If you see someone you don't know, take the opportunity, introduce yourself, go up, say hi, make a new friend. As far as what we have coming up, so Thursday we will have our Bible study. That'll be at 7:30. We're going to be continuing the Gospel of John. We'll be doing chapter 20. This coming Saturday we'll have Vespers and Midnight Praises starting at 6 p.m. And then on Sunday we will have liturgy, and we'll be blessed with Embe David joining us. So if you're available, please come by. Liturgy starts at 8:30. Other than that, you can follow us on social media. We have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Our handle is SMSM NYC. You can join our mailing list on the website, SMSM NYC as well, and then you'll get all of this information that way. If you want to join the WhatsApp group, just stop by, grab one of the servants. We can add you to the WhatsApp group. And then as you're doing your lovely Amazon shopping, please use Amazon Smile and add the church so that you can be blessing the church with your own personal shopping. And then, of course, you can always go on the website and donate as well. And that's it. I just want to say thank you again to Mina, and especially thank you to Mike. I don't know if he's still here, but Mike did an amazing job sort of getting us back online IT-wise tonight. So thank you to Mike. And that's it. I'll turn it over to Abuna.
Please stand up for prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Through the intercessions of the Theotokos, Saint Mary, O Lord, grant us the forgiveness of our sins. We worship you, O Christ, with your good Father and the Holy Spirit, for you have risen and saved us. A mercy of peace, a sacrifice of praise. O Lord, make us worthy to pray thankfully. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. The love of God the Father, the grace of his only begotten Son, Jesus Christ our Lord, and the fellowship and the gift of the Holy Spirit be with you all. You may go in peace. The peace of the Lord be with you all.